A furious slap landed across Zarya's face. It came from the father who had controlled her for as long as she could remember, all because Zarya wanted to break free from the life he had forced her to live. She only wanted freedom. But instead, all she received was a slap and his harsh words. "You're my daughter. Everything I tell you to do is for your own good. Stop arguing, be obedient, and do as you're told." Zarya lowered her head as tears filled her eyes. She wished she had been brave enough to fight for the life she truly wanted. Maybe then, everything that followed would have been different. One clear morning in the small town of Willow Creek, North Carolina, a Greyhound bus suddenly pulled to a stop in the distance. "We're here! We're here! Everyone getting off! Let's go!" The driver's voice suddenly rang out. Passengers hurriedly pushed past one another as they got off the bus. At that moment, a young woman in her 20s remained seated calmly, gazing out through the window. "Miss, we've arrived. Aren't you getting off?" Seeing that the young woman was still sitting there, the driver turned around and reminded her, "Yes, sir. I'm getting off now." Zarya quickly stepped down from the bus. A peaceful scene unfolded before her eyes. Birds chirped in the trees. A gentle breeze rustled through the leaves. The fresh scent of newly harvested crops filled the air beneath the warm morning sunlight. Zarya took a deep breath, enjoying the clean country air. It had been several months since she had last returned home. She quickly made her way toward the far end of town. In the distance stood a small wooden house. Several children were playing in the yard, their laughter echoing through the quiet morning. The moment she stepped through the gate, one of the children spotted her and immediately shouted excitedly, "Zarya! Zarya's back! Mom! Dad! Zarya's home!" The boy rushed forward and threw his arms around her. It was Jalen, her youngest brother. Hearing his excited shouting, Bernice hurried out of the house. "Zarya, you're home." "Yes, Mom, I just got back. So you finally remembered the way home. This time you're staying here. If you leave again, don't blame me." That voice belonged to Clyde. No one knew when he had arrived, but when he saw Zarya standing outside the house, he immediately spoke. In the past, Clyde had strongly opposed Zarya's decision to move to Charlotte for work, because in his mind, women were supposed to stay home, live like every other woman in town, take care of the house, cook meals, and eventually get married. But Zarya was different. She had argued with her father so she could move to the city. She wanted to live her own life. She wanted freedom, independence, and the ability to rely on herself instead of anyone else. Zarya was tired of the outdated beliefs that her father and many people in this town still held. Because of that, she and Clyde were constantly in conflict. "Come inside and wash up first." Seeing the tension building, Bernice quickly grabbed Zarya's hand and led her into the house. She was afraid that if they remained outside any longer, father and daughter would end up arguing once again. That evening, while the family was gathered around the dinner table, Clyde suddenly spoke. "Tomorrow, Reginald's family is coming here to meet Zarya. You two should make sure everything is properly prepared." Hearing that, Zarya immediately frowned. "Why are they coming to meet me? I've told you many times already. I don't want to get married yet." Seeing his daughter respond that way, Clyde angrily shouted, "If I say you're getting married, then you're getting married. A woman is born to stay home, get married, have children, and take care of the household, not run around outside trying to earn a few dollars. Besides, Reginald's family is respected. They own land everywhere and have more money than they can spend. The fact that they're interested in you is a blessing. Don't make me angry." After speaking, Clyde slammed his hand down on the table. The atmosphere instantly became tense. Bernice sat beside them without daring to speak. She quietly grabbed Zarya's hand and looked at her, as if begging her not to argue. But Zarya was far too stubborn to accept an arranged marriage. She didn't want to live a life that someone else had chosen for her. She refused to follow the same path that everyone in this town seemed destined to walk. "I already said no. I won't marry him. Even if I die, I won't marry him." After saying that, Zarya abruptly stood up and walked outside, leaving Clyde behind as he exploded with rage. He slammed the table, kicked the chairs, and swept the dishes onto the floor. Plates shattered everywhere. "Ungrateful girl, get out! Get out of my house!" On the other side of the room, Bernice held Jalen in her arms and cried because in this house she had no voice at all. Even though she loved her daughter, there was nothing she could do. This was the way things were. Those outdated beliefs had become deeply rooted in the minds of the people in this town, impossible to change. After arguing with her father, Zarya walked down to the river behind the house. She collapsed onto the grass and cried uncontrollably. The river at night was quiet and still. A gentle breeze drifted across the water, bringing relief from the summer heat. The distant sounds of birds echoed from the trees along the riverbank. Zarya picked up small stones and repeatedly threw them into the water. It was the only way she could release the frustration and pain building inside her. Come back inside, sweetheart. The night air is getting cold. You'll get sick sitting out here. Bernice's voice came from beside her. Zarya turned around and realized her mother had arrived without her noticing. Bernice gently sat down next to her, wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and tried to comfort her. Let it go, sweetheart. This is simply the fate of a woman. Don't argue with your father anymore. Reginald's family is well off and respected. If you marry into that family, you won't have to suffer. Bernice continued trying to persuade her daughter because that was how she herself had lived her entire life. Everything Clyde said was treated like an order. She had never once dared to go against him. Enduring and obeying had become the way she survived for all those years. Why are you saying that too, Mom? I don't want to get married. I don't want my life to be decided by someone else, Zarya said through tears. Seeing her daughter like that, Bernice's heart ached, but as a mother, there was nothing she could do to help her. The next morning, just as Clyde had announced the night before, Reginald's family was coming to meet Zarya. She had heard that Reginald was one of the most influential men in Willow Creek. He was the kind of man who had both money and power. Families lined up hoping to marry their daughters into his household. But because of Zarya's beauty, Reginald had personally chosen to come and ask for her hand in marriage. Hello, sir. It's been a long time. Please come in. When Clyde saw Reginald approaching, he hurried outside to greet him. His face instantly became warm and welcoming. However, Reginald simply smiled politely and walked inside. Following behind him was Darius, his only son. At first glance, Darius looked exactly like the type of man Zarya disliked. His body was slender, his skin was smooth and fair, and there was nothing about him that struck her as masculine. Honey, bring the hot coffee over here, Clyde called toward the kitchen. A moment later, Bernice hurried in carrying a tray. Hello, sir. Welcome. Hello. Reginald politely greeted her back. Go get Zarya. Clyde frowned and turned toward his wife. Understanding immediately, Bernice excused herself and walked toward her daughter's room. Wake up, sweetheart. Why are you still lying here? Get up and come greet our guests. If your father finds out, he'll start yelling again, Bernice said as she gently shook Zarya's shoulder. What she didn't know was that Zarya had been awake for a long time. She was only pretending to sleep because she wanted to avoid meeting Darius. But no matter what she did, she couldn't escape this situation. I'm not going out there, Zarya suddenly snapped. Seeing her daughter's reaction, Bernice immediately tried to calm her down. Just go out and meet them for a little while. If you don't like him, I'll try to talk to your father. But they've already come all the way here. If you refuse to come out, people will laugh at us. Your father will lose face. Hearing her mother's words, Zarya reluctantly agreed. Even though she had no desire to meet Darius, she chose to do it for her family and to preserve her father's dignity. Only this once. I'm only meeting him this one time. All right, just this once. I'll try to talk to your father afterward. Zarya stood up, fixed her hair, changed into something more presentable, and walked outside. Reginald saw her. She politely greeted him. They weren't exaggerating. She's even more beautiful in person, Reginald said immediately. Her beauty genuinely surprised him. Her delicate features, large eyes, smooth dark skin, and elegant appearance made her look graceful and refined. It was as if he had already chosen her as his daughter-in-law the moment he saw her. Darius, say hello. Reginald turned toward his son. Darius looked somewhat timid and reserved, but after hearing his father's words, he quickly stepped forward. Hello, I'm Darius. Hello. Zarya replied politely before looking at him. In her eyes, he looked exactly like a pampered rich boy, the type of man she disliked the most. They look perfect together, don't they? Absolutely. A handsome young man and a beautiful young woman, the two fathers smiled happily. Throughout the visit, they discussed wedding plans, possible dates, and arrangements for bringing Zarya into Darius's family. When it was finally time to leave, Reginald handed Clyde a thick envelope. This is a small gift from our family. We'll discuss everything else and come back soon to finalize the wedding plans. If there's anything your family needs, just let us know. We'll make sure everything is taken care of. After saying that, Reginald and Darius left. As soon as they were gone, Zarya finally spoke. Why did you take his money? I've told you already. I don't want to get married. Holding the envelope of money in his hand, Clyde's attitude immediately softened. He turned toward Zarya and spoke in a gentler voice. Just listen to me. If you marry into Reginald's family, you'll live a comfortable life. But I don't want to. When those words left her mouth, it was as if she had crossed a line. Clyde's face darkened instantly. He slammed his hand down on the table and shouted, You're going to marry him. If you still consider me your father, then you're going to marry Darius. Seeing how determined and unreasonable her father was being, Zarya could no longer control her emotions. She raised her voice in protest. Why are you forcing me to marry someone I don't love? I barely even know him. You're not marrying me off. You're selling me. You're blinded by Reginald's money. You've let money cloud your judgment. How can you be this cruel? In the heat of the moment, Zarya could no longer hold back her true feelings. The instant she finished speaking, a hard slap landed across her face. Pain shot through her entire body. Clyde's face twisted with anger. His eyes turned red as he gripped the cup in his hand so tightly it nearly cracked. You think I'm selling my daughter for money? You think I'm that kind of man? Say it again. Go ahead and say it again. The atmosphere inside the house became suffocating. Bernice stood nearby, trembling and crying. Seeing how furious her husband had become, she was terrified that he might do something terrible. She cautiously stepped forward. Please, let's calm down and talk this through. You stay out of this, Clyde shouted. Look at what your precious daughter is saying. Look how well you've raised her. She's accusing me of selling her for money. Instead of calming down, he grew even angrier. As always, he placed all the blame on Bernice. In this house, no one was allowed to speak against him, not even his own wife. His controlling nature had become part of who he was. Clyde began throwing things around the room. Dishes crashed onto the floor. Glass shattered across the house. He roared like a furious beast. Ungrateful girl, get out! Get out of my sight! Holding her burning cheek, Zarya burst into tears and ran out of the house. That night, after thinking carefully about everything, she finally made a decision. She would run away. She believed it was the only way to stop her father from forcing her to marry Darius. Late that night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Zarya quietly crept toward the front door. Her hand reached for the handle. Suddenly, panic filled her chest. The door wouldn't open. She pulled harder, then harder still. No matter what she did, the door refused to budge. Just then, she heard a familiar voice outside. It was Clyde. He was speaking to Bernice. From now on, bring her meals in her room. Nobody opens that door. Nobody lets her out. Once Reginald's family comes back to finalize the wedding date, we'll deal with the rest later. Do we really have to do this? She's already grown up. Maybe we can keep talking to her, Bernice asked cautiously. Enough. Don't say another word. And if you help her escape, you can leave this house too. Do you understand me? Clyde's voice was filled with menace. Bernice immediately fell silent. Yes, I understand. Hearing the conversation between her parents, Zarya felt as though her entire world had collapsed. Clyde had clearly anticipated that she would try to run away. That was why he had acted first. Zarya slowly sank to the floor. Tears streamed down her face as despair consumed her. She couldn't understand how her own father could treat her this way. She pounded on the door and screamed, Dad, please let me out. Please let me out. Hearing his daughter's cries, Clyde acted as though he heard nothing at all. He simply turned and walked away. Bernice remained behind, tears running down her face. Seeing her daughter in such pain broke her heart. Stop yelling, sweetheart. Once your father makes up his mind, he never changes it. Mom, please let me out. Please let me out. But Zarya's pleading only made Bernice feel even more helpless because she knew the truth. No matter what happened, she would never dare go against Clyde. Just listen to your father. With those words, Bernice walked away, leaving her daughter alone with her tears. Several days later, a voice called from outside. Clyde, are you home? It was Reginald. He had come with his wife to discuss the wedding arrangements for Zarya and Darius. We've picked a date. The wedding will be on the 12th. We've already checked everything. It's the perfect day for the ceremony. Hearing that, Clyde and Bernice exchanged uneasy looks. Bernice spoke first. The 12th? Isn't that only 2 days away? That's so soon. Clyde nodded. Yes. It's very rushed. We won't have enough time to prepare. Is there another date available? Reginald seemed to understand their concerns immediately. Don't worry. We've already prepared everything. Your family won't need to do a thing. We'll take care of it all. Just let us know what you need so we can make sure everything is done properly. Then Reginald pulled out another envelope and handed it to Clyde. This is for the wedding expenses. Please take it. Clyde immediately waved his hands. No, we can't accept that. It's nothing. We're about to become family. Please don't be embarrassed. Just take it. Faced with Reginald's generosity and the money in front of him, Clyde could no longer refuse. He accepted the envelope and repeatedly thanked him. In his mind, this was simply the blessing his daughter had brought to the family. Meanwhile, Jalen had secretly overheard the entire conversation. The moment Reginald left, he ran straight to Zarya's room. Zarya, Reginald's family was just here. I heard Mom and Dad talking. The wedding is in 2 days. Hearing those words, Zaria froze. She never imagined things would move so quickly. Panic filled her chest. If the wedding was only 2 days away, she had almost no time left. No matter what happened, she had to find a way to escape. Jalen, do you love me? She suddenly asked. Of course I do. Then you have to help me. Please help me get out of here. But I'm scared of Dad. Jalen hesitated. In this house, nobody had any authority except Clyde. Can you really stand by and watch them force me into this marriage? You're the only one who can help me, Jalen. Please. Hearing his sister beg him, Jalen's heart softened. Though he was only 12 years old, he loved his sister deeply. He didn't want her to be forced into a marriage she didn't want. That night, after Clyde fell asleep, Jalen quietly stole the key. Step by step, he carefully approached Zaria's room and unlocked the door. Jalen knew that if Clyde woke up the next morning and discovered what he had done, he would be beaten severely. But as long as his sister could be happy, he was willing to accept it. Hurry, Zaria. Dad might wake up. Thank you. I'm leaving now. Be good and listen to Mom and Dad, Zaria said as she kissed her little brother on the forehead. She wiped at her eyes. This time, she didn't know when she would ever return home again. Even though it broke her heart to leave, she had no other choice. Go, hurry, Jalen said through tears. His mouth told her to leave, but his hands refused to let go. That was what family was. No matter how painful it felt, seeing someone you loved find happiness made every sacrifice worth it. Carrying a small backpack, Zaria quickly stepped out of the house. Just as she reached the front gate, a familiar voice suddenly rang out from behind her. Stop right there. It was Clyde. He had woken up and discovered that Zaria was trying to escape. His face twisted with fury. His eyes burned with rage as he charged toward her like a predator hunting its prey. Smack! A hard slap landed across Zaria's face. Before she could react, Clyde grabbed her wrist and dragged her back toward the house. Fear flooded through her body. Tears streamed down her face. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. The color drained from her face. Where do you think you're going? Clyde shouted. In a fit of rage, he grabbed a broom from the corner and pointed it directly at her. Hearing the commotion, Bernice rushed out of her room. Before her stood her terrified daughter and her furious husband. Bernice immediately grabbed Clyde's arm. Please, let's talk about this. Don't hit her. But Clyde ignored her completely. He shoved Bernice aside and swung the broom at Zaria. You're trying to humiliate me? You're trying to disgrace this family? As he shouted, he continued striking her. Seeing his sister being beaten, Jalen ran forward crying and dropped to his knees. Dad, it's my fault. I opened the door. Please don't hit her. Hearing his son's confession, Clyde stopped. His expression changed. He stared directly at Jalen. Clyde had never beaten him before. In fact, he rarely even scolded him. But what Jalen had done tonight was unforgivable in his eyes. Without hesitation, Clyde slapped him hard across the face. Watching her little brother get hit because of her, Zaria could no longer stay silent. Dad is selfish. Why do you always think you're right? Why won't you ever listen to anyone else? Clyde's anger exploded again. You're my daughter. I have the right to decide what's best for you. When I tell you to do something, you do it. You don't get a choice. Yes, you gave me life, but this life belongs to me. You don't have the right to control it. Every person has their own path. Why do you keep forcing everyone to live according to yours? I don't want to get married. I don't want to marry someone I don't love. I don't want to live a life chosen by someone else. I want to live my own life. I want to make my own choices. Is that really so wrong? You've always been selfish. And you only care about your own feelings. Your feelings matter, but everyone else's feelings mean nothing to you. In that moment, Zaria finally poured out everything she had been holding inside. She believed that maybe, just maybe, her words would make Clyde understand. Maybe he would finally see how much pain he had caused her, but some people never change. Without saying another word, Clyde grabbed Zaria and locked her back inside the room. No matter how much she cried, screamed, or begged, nothing could change his mind. I swear this right now. If anyone helps her escape again, the consequences will be much worse. After delivering his warning, Clyde locked the door and walked away. Bernice could do nothing except hold Jalen and cry. Alone in the darkness, Zaria collapsed onto the floor. She sobbed until her body shook. For the first time in her life, she felt completely defeated. She no longer had the strength to fight. Slowly, she began to give up. Her eyes became empty and lifeless. Maybe this was simply her fate. Maybe no matter how hard she struggled, nothing would ever change. Maybe after marrying into Reginald's family, she would eventually find happiness. Maybe Darius would turn out to be a good husband. Maybe with time she would learn to love him. The days passed. Finally, October 12 arrived. Move that over there, hurry up, the groom's family will be here soon. People rushed everywhere as preparations filled the small house with noise and activity. Thanks to the money Reginald had provided, the wedding was being held on a grand scale. Clyde couldn't hide his pride. Neighbors gathered around, talking excitedly. Clyde is so lucky. Being connected to Reginald's family is a blessing. Zaria is going to live like a queen. Look at this wedding. It's incredible. Some people offered genuine congratulations. Others watched with jealousy. But Clyde stood proudly among them all. Becoming in-laws with the wealthiest family in the area filled him with satisfaction. Go check on Zaria. The groom's family will be here soon. I don't want anything going wrong. Yes, I know. Bernice immediately walked toward her daughter's room. Seeing Zaria standing there in a wedding dress, her chest tightened. Smile, sweetheart. Today is supposed to be the happiest day of your life. Bernice gently took her daughter's hand and tried to comfort her. But while everyone else celebrated, Zaria felt only sadness. Tears rolled silently down her face. Her expression was numb. Her fingers tightened around each other. Everything had happened too fast. She still couldn't believe this was real. For the sake of her family's reputation, for the sake of her father, she had finally stopped fighting. The strength she once possessed was gone. She no longer had the courage to resist. All she could do now was surrender herself to whatever fate awaited her. They're here! They're here! The groom's family is here! A child suddenly shouted from outside. At last, Reginald's family had arrived. They brought an enormous number of gifts. Expensive liquor, premium food baskets, luxury gift boxes, and finally a display filled with cash and gold. Though it was clearly a display of wealth, it was also Reginald's way of showing everyone just how powerful and successful his family truly was. The wedding that day went smoothly and without any problems. Zaria left with Darius and moved into Reginald's home as his daughter-in-law under the watchful eyes of everyone in Willow Creek. From that moment on, she officially had a husband. Her life of freedom and independence had come to an end. Early the next morning, before the roosters had even begun to crow, Zaria was already awake. She quietly came downstairs, swept the floors, cleaned the house, and busied herself preparing breakfast for the entire family. Because it was her first day as a daughter-in-law, Zaria didn't want any mistakes to happen. She didn't want anyone to have a reason to criticize her parents for not raising their daughter properly. What are you doing up so early? This house isn't like your family's house. Breakfast is already taken care of by the staff. You don't need to do any of this, Darius said as he walked downstairs and saw Zaria working diligently in the kitchen. I know. Hearing Darius's words, Zaria simply nodded. She knew his family was wealthy and had more servants than she could count, but this was her first breakfast as a daughter-in-law. She wanted to prepare everything herself. It was her way of showing respect to her husband and to his family. More than an hour later, Zaria finally finished preparing a carefully arranged breakfast. One by one, she carried steaming bowls of chicken noodle soup to the dining table and placed them neatly in front of each seat. By then, daylight had fully arrived and the entire household was awake. Zaria quietly walked upstairs and stopped outside Reginald's bedroom. Nervously, she knocked on the door. Dad, Mom, breakfast is ready. Please come downstairs and eat. All right, go on down first. Reginald's voice came from inside the room. About 10 minutes later, everyone had gathered around the dining table. About 10 minutes later, the entire family was gathered around the dining table. Everyone ate and chatted pleasantly. Suddenly, Loretta, Darius's mother, spoke up. So, when are the two of you planning to have a baby? The unexpected question caught Zaria completely off guard. She froze for several seconds, unsure of how she was supposed to answer. Everyone knew that she and Darius had not come together because of love. Their marriage had been arranged by their families. How could happiness be expected to appear overnight? These things took time. It wasn't something that could happen simply because someone wanted it to. Come on now, they just got married. You should give them some time. Seeing how uncomfortable Zaria looked, Reginald immediately spoke in her defense. Everyone knows that. But some things need to be made clear from the beginning. We only have one son in this family, so the two of them need to do what they should do. We can't have people saying our family has been denied blessings, Loretta said, while looking directly at Zaria. Throughout the entire conversation, Darius never reacted at all. He remained completely indifferent toward Zaria. In fact, he had always treated her coldly and with obvious distance. Even on their wedding night, after the celebration had finally ended, Darius dragged his exhausted body into the bedroom. When he saw Zaria sitting on the bed waiting there, he didn't even bother looking at her. Perhaps Darius believed that Zarya was the type of woman who chased money and status, and that was why she had agreed to marry him. Because of that, whenever he looked at her, there was always a trace of contempt and disdain in his eyes. "Is the meal ready yet?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm almost done. Just a little longer. Do you even know what time it is now? All you do in this house is eat and sit around, yet you still can't manage to cook a proper meal. I should have known better. I never should have let my son marry you. You're completely useless." That was the sharp, bitter voice of Loretta. Throughout the past year, Zarya had lived in humiliation and resentment. Her mother-in-law was harsh and impossible to please, while her husband remained cold, distant, and indifferent. Even though Zarya had done everything she could to hold her marriage together and make it work with Darius, nothing ever changed. He was still cold toward her. He still looked at her with the same contempt and disdain every time he saw her. People always say you never truly know what goes on behind closed doors. Outsiders looked at Zarya and said she was lucky to be the daughter-in-law of a wealthy family. They thought she never had to worry about food or clothing and lived a life of comfort and luxury. But what they didn't know was that beneath all that outward glamour, everything inside was rotten. Although she carried the title of a wealthy family's daughter-in-law, since the day she entered this house, she had never touched a single dollar that belonged to the family. She worked no differently than a servant without pay. She took care of her husband. She served her in-laws. Her life repeated the same exhausting cycle day after day. As time passed, she gradually became accustomed to it. Her emotions had gone numb. Her body was still alive, but her soul had died long ago. "Is Mr. Reginald home?" A familiar voice came from outside the yard. "Yes, come on in." Reginald walked over and opened the gate. Following behind him was a man in his 60s holding the hand of a young boy around 12 years old. They stepped inside after Reginald invited them in. "Zarya!" the boy shouted. The voice startled her and she immediately turned around. It was Jalen, and the man standing beside him was Clyde. Why were they here? Zarya was confused, but at the same time overwhelmed with joy when she saw her father and younger brother. "Dad, Jalen, what are you doing here?" Zarya hurried over and asked. "See? We married our daughter off nearby, but it's been an entire year and she hasn't come home to visit her parents even once. She must be living such a comfortable life here that she forgot all about us," Clyde said with a laugh as he glanced toward Reginald. The truth was that Zarya had not returned home once during the entire year. It wasn't because she didn't want to. Every time she asked Loretta for permission to visit her family, Loretta always found excuses and said hurtful things that made her too afraid to go. "Go to the kitchen and bring some water for our guests," Reginald said. At the same moment, Jalen quickly ran after his sister. Seeing her younger brother again after so long, Zarya couldn't contain her happiness. She wrapped her arms around him and tears of joy rolled down her cheeks. "How is everything at home? Is Mom doing well?" "Mom's doing fine. Why haven't you come home? Mom told Dad and me to come see you today. She was worried something might have happened to you. Are you okay?" Jalen asked. "I'm fine. I just haven't had time to come home. When I get a chance, I'll come visit Mom. Tell her to take care of herself and not worry about me." Zarya struggled to hold back her emotions. She didn't want her parents to know about her current life. She was afraid they would worry, lose sleep, and spend every day thinking about her. She had convinced herself that this was simply the fate she was meant to endure. And once fate had been decided, there was no escaping it. "Stopping by for a visit, Mr. Clyde?" "Yes, ma'am. Hello." Loretta came downstairs with an unusually warm smile on her face. She spoke in a sweet, overly polite voice. "How is your wife doing, Mr. Clyde?" "She's doing well. We hadn't seen Zarya come home, so I came by to see how she was doing. She's still young and inexperienced. If she does anything wrong, I hope you and your husband will continue to teach and guide her. Now that you mention it, that's exactly what's been troubling me lately." Loretta suddenly let out a sigh and turned to look at Clyde. As soon as he noticed her expression, anxiety filled his heart. He was afraid that his daughter had done something wrong. He was afraid people would say he and Bernice hadn't raised her properly. What happened? Did Zarya do something wrong? Well, look at this. They've been married for an entire year, and the two of them still haven't given me a grandchild. You know our family only has one son. If there's no heir, who am I supposed to leave everything to? I've talked to them many times, but neither of them listens. Now that you're here, Mr. Clyde, maybe you can talk some sense into them for me," Loretta said. Then she added, "Tell me honestly, Mr. Clyde, Zarya's health is fine, isn't it?" Those words felt like a direct insult. Clyde could only lower his head, force an awkward smile, and answer, "Yes, of course. I'll talk to them. This can't continue. I'm sorry we've caused you and your husband so much concern." After saying that, Clyde walked straight into the kitchen, When he saw Zarya, he stepped forward and slapped her across the face. The blow came out of nowhere. Zarya froze in shock. She had no idea what was happening or why her father had suddenly hit her. "Why do you always embarrass me, Zarya?" Clyde shouted. "Why have you been married for an entire year and still haven't given them a child? Today they practically insulted me to my face. They're saying you can't even give your husband a child, a woman who can't have children." Every word Clyde spoke felt like a knife stabbing directly into her heart. It wasn't because she didn't want a child. The truth was that throughout the entire year of marriage, Darius had never touched her. He barely even looked at her. "Jalen, let's go. I don't want to stay here and listen to people insult me," Clyde said angrily. Then he turned back toward Zarya. "As for you, do whatever you have to do. Just don't let people keep insulting your parents to our faces. It's humiliating. Do you understand how humiliating this is?" After saying those words, Clyde grabbed Jalen's hand and left, leaving Zarya standing there alone, with a face full of despair. The pain was unbearable. It felt as though thousands of knives were stabbing her heart. If even her own father could treat her this way, what right did she have to expect kindness from anyone else? That night, Zarya tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Her father's words echoed endlessly in her mind. She kept remembering the slap he had given her that morning. Tears streamed silently down her face. For the first time, she felt as though the entire world had turned its back on her. Alone in the large, dark bedroom, Zarya curled herself into a ball beneath the blanket. The loneliness and sorrow spread through every part of her body. She was drowning in a storm of conflicting emotions. Suddenly, the bedroom door opened. A man staggered into the room. The strong smell of alcohol filled the air around him. His steps were unsteady as he dragged his exhausted body forward before collapsing onto the floor. It was Darius, once again. He had come home drunk. The moment Zarya realized he was back, she quickly got up and switched on the light. Looking at the man lying before her, she couldn't help letting out a weary sigh. Then she struggled to lift him onto the bed. After that, she hurried into the bathroom, soaked a towel with water, and returned to wipe him down. If she left him there all night and he woke up sick the next morning, Loretta would never let her hear the end of it. It had happened many times before. Whenever Darius came home drunk and ended up catching a cold, every bit of blame somehow fell on Zarya. Loretta would spend days criticizing and insulting her, accusing her of failing to take care of her husband properly and letting her precious son suffer. Just as Zarya turned around and started walking back into the bathroom, a hand grabbed her and pulled her backward. It was Darius. In his drunken state, he had completely lost control of himself. This was the first time he had ever been this physically close to her. Darius pulled her onto the bed and immediately ripped open the shirt she was wearing. Without saying a word, he lunged at her like a wild beast. His aggressive and forceful behavior terrified Zarya. Instinctively, she shoved him away and quickly grabbed a blanket from beside her to cover herself. Fear spread across her face. Her hands began trembling uncontrollably. No matter what happened, this was still her first time. He didn't have to be so rough. Seeing the frightened look on her face, Darius let out a mocking laugh. He sat up, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a thick stack of cash. Without hesitation, he threw the money directly into Zarya's face. "What? You want money? Then take it." Bills scattered everywhere across the room. Watching him do that, Zarya felt deeply humiliated. In Darius's eyes, she was nothing more than a materialistic woman who had sold herself for money. He believed she had entered his family for one reason only: wealth, and now she was pretending to be noble and hard to get. After saying that, Darius grabbed her again and dragged her back onto the bed. He pressed her down and buried his face against her body, breathing in her scent. Then he bit down hard on her soft lips until they bled. The smell of alcohol poured from his breath directly into her face. His hands wandered desperately across her body as though searching for something to hold on to. Tears streamed from Zarya's eyes. Her fingers clenched tightly around the bedsheet. She closed her eyes and forced herself to endure everything that was happening without resistance. That night, the alcohol turned Darius into a beast. He pounced on her, consumed by desire, devouring his prey with reckless hunger. After a long and exhausting night, morning finally came. Zarya dragged her aching body downstairs. Every muscle hurt. Her arms and legs felt weak and sore. Scratches and bruises covered her skin from what had happened the night before. Her face looked pale and exhausted. Her eyes were empty and lifeless. She looked less like a living person and more like a walking corpse. When Loretta saw Zarya, who was standing in the living room, she immediately spoke. "Why didn't you just sleep until noon? Why don't you let the whole family starve to death while you're at it? You're already living off this family. and you still don't know your place. Every word that came out of Loretta's mouth was unpleasant. Because Zaria was so exhausted, she had accidentally overslept and failed to wake up early to prepare breakfast like she normally did. That was enough for Loretta to start criticizing and complaining again. "I'm sorry, Mom. I was feeling unwell and accidentally overslept. I'll make breakfast right now. Forget it. By the time you're done, we'd all be dead already. If you're tired, then go rest. Leave everything to this old woman. Honestly, the way you talk makes it sound like this family works you to death and never lets you rest. What are you trying to say? That I'm cruel?" Loretta snapped. "No, Mom, that's not what I meant." "Then maybe I should send you back to your parents' house so they can worship you there. Clearly this family isn't fortunate enough for someone like you." After saying that, Loretta turned and walked away. At that moment, Darius came downstairs. He had heard and witnessed everything that had happened, yet he didn't seem to care in the slightest. He didn't even bother saying a single word in her defense. Later that afternoon, Zaria sat alone on the rooftop terrace, staring blankly into the distance. Gentle breezes drifted through the air, bringing relief from the summer heat. She looked toward the horizon. The sun was slowly sinking beyond the distant skyline. Thin strands of golden light stretched across the sky as if trying to hold on to the last brilliance of the fiery red sun. The sunset was beautiful, pure, and complete, like a final promise at the end of the day. But for someone carrying a shattered heart and forcing herself to take one painful breath after another, no matter how beautiful the sunset was, it was still nothing more than the end of another day. "So you're up here," a man's voice suddenly came from behind her. "I've been calling you. Why didn't you answer?" Zaria turned around. It was Darius. "I was hanging laundry. Did you need something?" "What's in the kitchen today? Go to the market and buy some food. We're having guests over tonight." "All right, and make sure you buy something good. This family isn't like yours. Don't come back with the kind of food poor people eat." After saying that, Darius tossed several bills onto the ground and walked away. His words and attitude made Zaria feel deeply humiliated. No matter what, she was still his wife. She was the woman his parents had formally chosen and brought into this family. She wasn't some desperate woman who had begged him to marry her. Why did he have to treat her this way? After thinking about it for a moment, Zaria bent down and quietly picked up the bills that had been tossed carelessly onto the ground. Then she headed downstairs. Just as she reached the staircase, she heard the voice of a woman. "Your house is so beautiful. I wish I could live in a house this big." "Do you like it?" Darius asked. "Of course I do. Just wait. Sooner or later, you'll be living here too." "Really?" the woman replied excitedly. So that was the guest Darius had mentioned. Zaria had no idea who the woman was or why she was there. She immediately hurried downstairs. The moment the woman saw her, she turned around and greeted her politely. "Hello. You must be Zaria, right? How do you know my name?" Zaria asked. "I'm one of Darius's friends. He's told me so much about you." Hearing that, Zaria was surprised. She had never imagined that Darius would talk about her to anyone. What she didn't know was what kind of person he had described her as in those conversations. After a brief moment of thought, she forced a small smile and let it go. "Go buy the groceries and start cooking. Move faster." Darius barked from beside them. "There are still plenty of ingredients in the kitchen. Since your parents aren't home and there are only 3 of us eating tonight, I think buying more would be wasteful." "I said go, so go. Why do you always have to argue? Get moving." After saying that, Darius walked upstairs. Zaria obediently picked up her basket and left the house. Because it was already late in the afternoon, the market in town had closed. She had to travel much farther than usual before she could find everything she needed. About an hour later, Zaria returned home carrying a basket full of groceries. She hurried into the kitchen, set the basket down, and looked around. For some reason, the house felt strangely quiet. Where had Darius and that woman gone? Why had they left the house without even locking the door? Without thinking much about it, Zaria began preparing dinner. About 30 minutes later, all the dishes were ready and neatly arranged on the table. But Darius still hadn't returned. Was he planning to eat or not? Feeling irritated, Zaria headed upstairs to get her phone and call him. The moment she reached the bedroom door, the sight before her left her stunned. The woman was stepping out of her bedroom. Her hair was messy and her clothes were disheveled. Instantly, Zaria sensed that something was terribly wrong. She walked into the room and saw Darius hurriedly buttoning up his shirt. The bedsheet that she had carefully straightened that morning was now completely wrinkled and in disarray. Zaria looked directly at Darius. Her eyes silently demanded an explanation, but Darius said nothing. He didn't even seem to care how she felt. Instead, he simply turned around and walked away. In that moment, Zarya felt nothing but pity for herself. How could he do something like this while she was still his wife? How could he bring another woman into their bedroom and betray her on the very bed where she slept every night? What exactly was she in his eyes? Filled with humiliation and anger, Zarya stormed downstairs. The scene before her made her sick to her stomach. Darius and the woman were sitting together, laughing and eating the meal she had spent hours preparing. They acted as though she didn't even exist. They openly behaved however they wanted right in front of her. Furious, Zarya rushed forward and flipped the entire table over. Plates and food crashed onto the floor. That single action instantly triggered Darius's temper. He strode over and slapped her across the face. "Have you lost your mind? What the hell are you doing? I'm the one who should be asking you that," Zarya shouted back. "Do you even consider me your wife? How could you bring another woman into this house and make me serve both of you? And then do those disgusting things on my bed? You're disgusting, Darius. I've never met a man as disgusting as you." Hearing her words, Darius lunged forward and wrapped his hand around her throat. His face twisted with rage. His eyes widened violently. "Yeah, I'm disgusting. So what are you going to do about it?" He snarled. "Don't forget who you are. In this house, you're nothing but someone living off my family. My parents paid money to bring you here for one reason, to give me a child. But you can't even do something that simple. So if I go find another woman to give me one, what's wrong with that? A useless woman like you has no right to raise her voice at me. Do you understand?" After saying that, Darius shoved her to the ground. The broken pieces of porcelain from the overturned dishes sliced into her hand. Blood immediately began flowing from the wound. Darius didn't even glance at her. He grabbed the other woman's hand and walked out of the house. Now, in the enormous house, Zarya was completely alone. She sat on the floor and cried in agony. The pain in her body was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. Even though she had never truly loved Darius, she still couldn't accept what he had done. It was a cruel humiliation, a brutal insult. Life truly was a chain of tragedies, and happiness seemed to have forgotten she existed. Sometime later, after everything that had happened, Zarya continued living under the same roof as Darius, enduring everything in silence. She no longer had any other choice. According to the customs of Willow Creek, if a woman chose to leave her husband, she would immediately be labeled immoral and disgraceful. People would curse her and shame her parents. Because of that, Zarya would rather suffer alone than bring trouble and humiliation upon her family. As usual, she headed to the market early that morning, carrying a shopping basket. After returning home, she accidentally overheard a conversation between Loretta and Darius. "She's pregnant?" Loretta's shocked voice rang out. "Yes. She's about 4 weeks along already." "Then what are you going to do now?" "What else can I do? I'll have to marry her. That's my child. I can't let my own child grow up without a name or proper status." "That girl is impressive, isn't she? Unlike Zarya, after all these years, she still hasn't given us a single child. Completely useless." "But what about Zarya?" Darius asked worriedly. "If I divorce her now, people in town will call me an unfaithful husband. Our family will lose face. Don't worry about that. I'll take care of everything. Your job is to sit still and take good care of her and the baby. Leave the rest to me." The basket slipped from Zarya's hands and fell to the ground. So Darius had gotten another woman pregnant, and now Loretta was trying to find a way to get rid of her so that woman could take her place as the new daughter-in-law. Yet strangely, Zarya didn't feel much of anything. By now, her emotions had become numb. She simply didn't care anymore. She had already endured so much pain that one more wound hardly mattered. After a moment, Zarya bent down, picked up the basket, and quietly walked into the house. The next day, as Zarya was walking past Loretta's room, she heard the voice of a man coming from inside. It wasn't Reginald's voice, and it wasn't Darius's either. The voice belonged to a man she had never met before. "Do we really have to be this cruel?" the man suddenly asked. "Cruel? What's cruel about it? Just do exactly what I told you to do. Why are you asking so many questions?" Loretta snapped back. "Yes, ma'am." A moment later, the man opened the door and stepped outside. As soon as he came out, he came face to face with Zarya. For some reason, the moment he saw her, he looked startled. His eyes immediately shifted away as though he were trying to avoid her gaze. The strange reaction only made Zarya more confused. Who was he? And what kind of relationship did he have with Loretta? Later that day, everyone else was out of the house. Reginald had gone to meet several old friends. Darius was at work. Only Zarya and Loretta remained at home, busy with household chores in the backyard. Suddenly, Zarya heard Loretta calling from inside the house. "Zarya, where are you? Make me a glass of orange juice." Hearing her mother-in-law's voice, Zarya immediately put everything aside, wiped her hands, and hurried indoors. About 5 minutes later, she entered Loretta's room carrying a glass of orange juice. She carefully placed it on the table and said, "Here's your orange juice, Mom." After speaking, she turned to leave, but Loretta immediately called her back. "Wait! Go make me a bowl of noodles. I'm hungry." Zarya found the request strange. Loretta never ate at this hour, and she hated noodles. Why would she ask for them today? Confused, Zarya turned around and asked, "You want noodles? Are you deaf?" Loretta shouted. Hearing that, Zarya didn't dare ask any more questions. She quietly went downstairs and started cooking. When she returned to the room a short while later, she noticed that Loretta was still holding the glass of orange juice but hadn't taken a single sip. The moment Loretta saw her, the expression in her eyes changed. "How did you make this? It's so sour. Who could possibly drink something like this?" she snapped. Then she shoved the glass toward Zarya. Looking at the orange juice, Zarya was confused. Before bringing it upstairs, she had added sugar and even tasted it herself. How could it possibly be sour? Was Loretta deliberately trying to make trouble for her? "I did add sugar, Mom," Zarya quickly explained. "You call this sweet?" Loretta snapped. "If you're so sure you added sugar, then drink the entire glass and prove I'm lying." "No, Mom. Let me make you another one," Zarya said as she reached for the glass. But before she could leave, Loretta shouted again. "Stop right there! I told you to drink it. Didn't you hear me? Or did you make it sour on purpose to get back at me, and now you're afraid to drink it yourself?" Faced with the accusation, Zarya lifted the glass and drank every last drop. She wanted to prove that she wasn't the kind of person who would play petty games or secretly take revenge on anyone. The moment she finished the drink, a sinister smile slowly appeared on Loretta's face. "Fine. Maybe I misunderstood you. Now go downstairs." "Yes, Mom," Zarya replied, before turning to leave. As she reached the staircase, a sudden wave of dizziness struck her. Her legs gave way beneath her. She collapsed onto the floor. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered into pieces. Hearing the sound, Loretta immediately rushed out of the room. When she saw Zarya lying unconscious on the floor, she quickly dragged her into the bedroom. Then she picked up the phone and called someone. While Zarya had been downstairs cooking noodles, Loretta had secretly slipped sleeping pills into the orange juice and then deliberately forced her to drink it. But why? What exactly was she trying to do? About 15 minutes later, the doorbell suddenly rang. Loretta hurried outside and opened the door. "Get in here quickly before she wakes up." After saying that, she pushed the man inside and quickly locked the door behind him. "Come with me." The man silently followed her upstairs. When they reached the bedroom, Loretta opened the door. On the bed lay Zarya, unconscious and completely unclothed. It turned out that after learning her son had gotten another woman pregnant, Loretta had devised a plan to drive Zarya out of the house, so Darius could openly marry the other woman without being branded an unfaithful husband. Loretta wanted to make herself look like the victim. She wanted Zarya to become the criminal. She intended to create a false scene that would make it appear Zarya had committed adultery. She wanted everyone to catch her in the act so that Zarya would never again be able to hold her head up in Willow Creek. "Why are you still standing there? Get in," Loretta said coldly. "But isn't this too cruel?" the man asked. Deep down, he understood that what he was about to do was immoral. But money had a way of changing people. The promise of payment was enough to make him ignore his conscience. "Shut up. You've already taken my money, so do exactly what you're being paid to do. And be careful," Loretta snapped. "Besides, if she could give my son a child, none of this would be happening. She deserves it." After saying that, Loretta slammed the bedroom door shut. Now only Zarya and the stranger remained inside the room. No one knew whether, at the final moment, the man would come to his senses and spare her. About 15 minutes later, Darius and Reginald returned home after receiving a phone call from Loretta. "What happened? Why did you call us back so urgently?" Reginald asked the moment he stepped inside. Loretta immediately put on a worried expression and replied, "I don't know what's wrong with Zarya. She's locked herself inside the room since this morning. I've been calling her over and over, but she won't answer. I'm worried she might have fainted in there. I didn't know what else to do, so I called both of you home." After hearing those words, Darius immediately headed upstairs. When he reached the bedroom door, he began knocking loudly. "Zarya, open the door!" But there was no response. He knocked again and again, still nothing. Since nobody answered, Darius stepped back and kicked the door with all his strength. Bang! The bedroom door burst open. The scene inside instantly left everyone frozen in shock. Zarya was lying in the arms of a strange man. Neither of them had a single piece of clothing on. The moment the stranger saw everyone rushing into the room, he panicked. He grabbed the clothes beside the bed and hurriedly started putting them on. "Oh my God, oh my God," Loretta screamed dramatically. "What kind of shameless woman brings another man home to sleep with while her husband is away? How dare you?" As she shouted, Loretta rushed forward and grabbed Zarya by the hair. Only then did Zarya slowly regain consciousness. She opened her eyes and saw everyone standing around, staring at her. Confusion immediately filled her face. She turned her head and saw a strange man sitting on the bed beside her. Looking down at herself, she realized she wasn't wearing any clothes. Panic exploded inside her. She had no idea what was happening. None of it made any sense. Was she dreaming? Smack! Loretta's hand struck her across the face. The slap instantly brought her back to reality. Everything was real. This wasn't a dream at all. "You shameless woman! This family must be cursed to have a daughter-in-law like you," Loretta screamed. "Because of you, this family will never have descendants. And now you've even brought another man into this house while your husband was away. Do you have any shame at all?" As she shouted, Loretta continuously hit and cursed Zarya. Seeing his wife in bed with another man, Darius instantly lost control. His fists clenched tightly. Rage burned in his eyes. Even though he had never loved Zarya, she was still his wife in name. No man could tolerate being betrayed like this. To him, it was the ultimate humiliation. Without saying a word, Darius stormed forward, grabbed Zarya by the hair, and violently yanked her backward. Then he slapped her hard across the face. Blood immediately began running from the corner of her mouth. Grinding his teeth, he hissed through his anger, "You filthy woman! How many times have you cheated on me? How many men have you been sleeping with behind my back?" Then, consumed by rage, Darius began beating her. Every blow he delivered was filled with hatred and humiliation. Zarya didn't even know how she could possibly explain herself. Everything she saw before her eyes was impossible to understand. Even she couldn't believe what had happened. If she couldn't make sense of it, why would anyone else believe she was innocent? All she could do was curl into herself and cry. Suddenly, she felt as though even if she jumped into a river, she would never be able to wash away the filth people now believed covered her name. "No, that's not true. That's not true," Zarya cried desperately. "Stop hitting her," Loretta stepped forward. "You'll only dirty your hands touching someone like that. I'll call her parents and tell them to come take her away." Then Loretta picked up the phone and called Clyde and Bernice. About 30 minutes later, Clyde and Bernice arrived in a panic after receiving Loretta's phone call. The moment they stepped inside, they saw everyone gathered in the living room. On the floor knelt their poor daughter. Tears streamed down Zarya's face. Her body was covered with bruises and injuries. The sight instantly broke Bernice's heart. Unable to hold back her tears, she rushed over, gently touched Zarya's face, and asked, "What happened? Who did this to you?" The moment she heard her mother's voice, Zarya broke down completely. Like a frightened child, she threw herself into Bernice's arms. All the pain, humiliation, and suffering she had endured came pouring out in uncontrollable sobs. "What's going on, in-laws?" Clyde suddenly asked. His face was filled with worry. He looked at Zarya, then turned toward Reginald, waiting for an explanation. "Don't call us in-laws anymore," Loretta snapped. "Look at the kind of daughter you raised. In broad daylight, she brought another man into our house and slept with him while her husband was away. Tell me, what kind of woman behaves like that? Take your precious daughter and leave. We don't want her here anymore." Loretta's words struck Clyde like a bolt of lightning. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. His legs suddenly felt weak. Slowly, he stepped toward Zarya and asked, "Tell me, is what she said true?" "No, Dad. Please believe me. I don't know how any of this happened," Zarya cried. She desperately wanted her father to understand, but she didn't know how to explain something she couldn't understand herself. "Smack!" Clyde slapped her across the face. "You say you don't know? Then who does know? Do you want me to die from shame? Did I ever teach you to live like this? Answer me." His face was red with fury. His eyes burned with humiliation as he stared at his daughter. Beside them, Bernice could only pull Zarya into her arms and shield her with her own body. "Take her home and discipline her yourselves," Loretta said coldly as she stood up. "If you keep shouting in our house, people will think our family is nothing but a bunch of uncivilized fools." After saying that, she turned and walked away. At the same moment, Reginald and Darius also stood up and left without saying a word. Now only Clyde, Bernice, and Zarya remained. "We're leaving!" Clyde shouted angrily. Bernice slowly helped her daughter to her feet and led her out of the house. The moment they arrived home, Clyde stormed into the kitchen, grabbed a wooden stick, and charged at his daughter as if she were his enemy. Blow after blow came crashing down onto Zarya's small body. By now, she no longer begged for mercy. She simply clenched her teeth and endured it. Part of her wished her father would beat her to death so she would never again have to carry this humiliation. She no longer cared whether she lived or died. Even her own family didn't believe her. What right did she have to expect anyone else to believe her innocence? Zarya collapsed onto the floor in pain. Tears streamed endlessly down her face. Despair consumed her. Every part of her body ached. It wasn't only physical pain. It felt as though thousands of arrows were piercing her heart all at once. "Please stop, I'm begging you. If you keep hitting her, she'll die," Bernice cried. She dropped to her knees and clutched Clyde's legs, desperately pleading for her daughter's life. Deep down, she didn't believe Zarya was capable of doing something so shameful and immoral. "Let go of me," Clyde roared. "Today I'm going to beat her to death. I don't have a daughter like this." He shoved Bernice aside and continued striking Zarya. "You brought shame on me. You let people insult me to my face. You've humiliated me so badly I can't even show my face anymore. Why didn't you just stab me and get it over with? How am I supposed to face anyone after this? How could you do this?" Suddenly, Clyde threw the stick aside and collapsed onto the ground. His eyes were red. It looked as though he had been crying. Never in his life had he felt so powerless and defeated. In Willow Creek, a scandal like this could follow a family for years. People talked, judged, and rarely forgot. Clyde didn't know how his daughter would survive after this. He didn't know how she would ever face the world again. Though he was strict and old-fashioned, he was still her father. What father could watch his child be humiliated, beaten, and thrown out of her husband's home without feeling pain? The days slowly passed. Little by little, the storm began to settle. At first, the entire town talked about nothing else. People whispered behind their backs. They mocked and insulted Clyde's family. For nearly a month, none of them dared step outside. They lived like turtles hiding in their shells, silently enduring the cruelty of other people's words. As for Zarya, after everything that had happened, she withdrew into herself. She spoke less and less. She became quiet, distant, and spent most of her time locked alone in her room, avoiding everyone around her. After a full year had passed, Zarya finally made a decision. She would move to Charlotte. She wanted to leave behind the dark chapter of her past and begin a new life. She believed that once she was gone, people in Willow Creek would eventually stop talking about what had happened. Her parents would finally be able to live in peace again. Their lives could return to the way they had been before. "Hello, Mom? Have you eaten yet?" Bernice asked gently. "Yes, Mom. I already ate. Are you doing all right? How are things over there?" "I'm fine. Everything's okay. You don't have to worry about me. The weather is starting to get colder. Make sure you wear a jacket when you go outside. Don't get sick." "I will, Mom. You take care of yourself too," Zarya replied softly. "All right. I need to go now. I've got some things to do." As soon as she finished speaking, Zarya quickly ended the call. She could no longer control her emotions after hearing her mother's voice. She was afraid that if the conversation continued, Bernice would realize she was crying and spend countless sleepless nights worrying about her. Zarya didn't want that. She slowly placed the phone down on the bed and burst into tears. The loneliness of living by herself in a strange city overwhelmed her. Everything around her felt unfamiliar. Every problem had to be solved alone. Every hardship had to be endured alone. She had a home, but she no longer felt brave enough to return to it. Years earlier, she had spent time working in Charlotte. She had faced challenges and difficulties before, but back then, she had not yet been broken. She had still been strong enough and brave enough to face whatever life threw at her. Whenever things became too difficult, she could always return to her mother's embrace. But now, everything had changed. Too many terrible things had happened to her. The weight of those experiences had drained away her strength. Time had transformed the strong, stubborn, and resilient young woman she once was into someone fragile, sensitive, and exhausted by life. "Zarya! Zarya! Are you home?" a young man's voice called from outside. Wiping away her tears, Zarya took a deep breath to compose herself before standing up and walking outside. "What is it, Mason?" "I brought you a few things from back home. Here, have some," Mason said as he handed her a bag of fresh fruit. His face lit up with a cheerful smile before he shyly turned away and looked down. Seeing how bashful he was, Zarya couldn't help laughing softly. Mason was a young man who lived in the same boarding house as she did. He came from rural Kentucky and had moved to Charlotte to earn a living. He was kind-hearted, hardworking, and easygoing, which made him well-liked by everyone around him. When Zarya first moved there, she didn't know anyone. Mason was the only person who took the initiative to help her. He was always cheerful, friendly, and eager to lend a hand whenever she needed anything. Because of that, Zarya had developed a very positive impression of him. Well, what's our gentleman bringing his lady today?" A second later, Lana, the neighbor living next door, appeared out of nowhere. "Come on, Lana, don't tease me like that. Someone might hear you and get the wrong idea," Mason replied awkwardly. "Wrong idea? What wrong idea? The whole boarding house knows he likes you. You're the only one pretending not to notice. He's a good guy, too. Kind, hardworking, and dependable. Sure, he doesn't have much money, but you'd be happy with him." Zarya knew Mason always seemed to care about her, but she had convinced herself that it was simply his personality. He treated everyone kindly. Because of that, she always felt comfortable around him. "No thanks, Lana. I don't want a relationship or marriage anymore. I don't think I'm suited for that kind of life." "Isn't it better to just live peacefully like this?" "That's only because you haven't met the right person yet," Lana replied. "Everyone has someone meant for them. When fate hasn't arrived, it's easy to think that way. But when fate finally shows up, you won't be able to run from it even if you try. Life is short, sweetheart. Open your heart and accept what comes your way. Don't keep punishing yourself for mistakes from the past. Nobody chooses those things. Look at me. I've already been through 2 marriages, but if love comes again, I'll welcome it. If happiness knocks on your door and you don't reach for it, how long are you going to wait?" After saying that, Lana turned around and went back into her room. Her words left Zarya deep in thought. Everyone in this little boarding community carried their own burdens. Lana had been through 2 marriages and was raising 3 children, yet she still smiled and lived life with optimism. Then there was old Mrs. Evelyn next door, already in her 80s. She had no husband, no children, and no family. Every day she sold lottery tickets to survive, yet Zarya had never once seen sadness or bitterness in her. Instead, she always greeted people with warmth and laughter. Even though the boarding house was poor and everyone came from different places with different stories, they treated each other like family. They shared one another's hardships. They supported one another. Here, Zarya felt warmth. She felt kindness. She felt the love and care everyone offered so freely. It slowly helped her heal and find the strength to keep moving forward. People often say that happiness is not a destination. It is a journey, and somewhere along that journey, perhaps at an unexpected crossroads or during a brief stop along the way, we may discover our own happiness. We may find the person who brings us peace, the person we want to walk beside for the rest of our lives. Several months later, the rain in Charlotte was especially heavy that day. Water poured onto the streets as if the sky were releasing all of its frustration at once. Cool autumn winds drifted through the air, carrying a chill that seemed to seep into everything around them. Standing beneath the bus stop shelter, Zarya couldn't stop shivering. She had rushed out that morning and forgotten to bring an umbrella. The only thing she was wearing was a thin black blouse. She had already been waiting there for 15 minutes, but the bus she needed still hadn't arrived. By now she was freezing. Her face had become pale. Her hands were clasped tightly together. Even her lips had begun turning blue. She didn't know whether the heavy rain had caused traffic congestion or if the bus simply wasn't running that day. She kept waiting and waiting, but there was still no sign of it. The rain is really coming down. At this hour, traffic is probably backed up everywhere. It'll likely be another 10 or 15 minutes. A man's voice spoke beside her. Zarya turned around. It was Mason. She didn't even know how long he had been standing there. "You're waiting for the bus too?" she asked softly. "What happened to your car?" "It broke down yesterday. I haven't had a chance to fix it yet, so today I'm taking the bus too." After speaking, Mason glanced toward her with gentle eyes. He could see how cold she was. Without hesitation, he took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Here, put this on." Mason had given her the only jacket he had. Immediately, Zarya shook her head and handed it back. She understood how he felt about her, and she didn't want to do anything that might encourage false hope. Her heart had frozen long ago. She wanted to be alone. She didn't want anyone stepping into her life and turning everything upside down again. The wounds of the past had transformed her into someone cold and emotionally distant. "No, it's okay. You wear it. I'll be fine." Zarya returned the jacket to him. At that exact moment, the bus finally arrived. The two of them boarded together and sat quietly. Neither said a word during the ride. Halfway through the trip, exhaustion overcame Zarya. She leaned her head against the window and drifted off to sleep without realizing it. Afraid that she might hit her head against the glass, Mason gently slipped his arm behind her and guided her head onto his shoulder. He didn't understand why. From the very first day he met her, he had felt such a strong desire to protect her. Looking at the small woman resting beside him, he often wondered what kind of pain she had endured to become so guarded and distant. While he was quietly admiring her beautiful face, the bus slammed on its brakes. The sharp stop startled Zarya awake. When she opened her eyes, she realized her head was resting on Mason's shoulder. His broad and dependable shoulder made her feel strangely safe. End of the line, everyone. Time to get off. The bus driver's voice shattered the awkward silence between them. At last, they had arrived. Zarya and Mason stepped off the bus and began walking back toward the boarding house together. As they approached, they noticed everyone gathered outside in the courtyard. It looked like the entire neighborhood was having a party. The moment Lana spotted them, she immediately shouted, "There you two are! Hurry up and get over here! Everyone's been waiting for you. It's Dylan's birthday today. He's treating the whole neighborhood to hot pot." "Oh no, it's Dylan's birthday?" Zarya laughed. "Happy birthday, Dylan. I didn't know, so I didn't get you a gift. I'll make it up to you later." "That's okay. Just sing me a song later and we're even," Dylan replied with a grin. That evening everyone ate, sang, and celebrated together. Smiles filled every face. For a little while, all the exhaustion and stress from work seemed to disappear. A second later, Dylan spoke up. "Does everyone want to play a game?" The entire group immediately shouted yes. "What should we play?" someone asked. "How about truth or dare? We've all had a few drinks." "Time to finally say all the things we've been hiding," Lana called out from across the yard. Everyone quickly agreed. They sat in a circle while Dylan explained the rules. "I'll spin this beer bottle. Whoever it lands on gets asked a question by the person spinning. You have to answer honestly. If you don't want to answer, you drink a shot. Everybody understand?" Everyone nodded. "All right then, I'll go first. Let's see who's the unluckiest person tonight. 1, 2, 3. The bottle spun around several times before finally stopping. "Lana!" Dylan shouted excitedly. He jumped to his feet laughing because the first person chosen happened to be the same woman who suggested the game. "Let me think. What should I ask?" Dylan dramatically placed a hand on his forehead as though deep in thought. The mischievous grin on his face made everyone laugh. "Hurry up before I make you sit out there by yourself," Lana barked. Okay, I've got one. "Have you ever hated me?" The question immediately made everyone burst out laughing. "Of course I have," Lana answered without hesitation. Dylan's face instantly dropped in disappointment. Everyone laughed even harder at how childish he looked. Lana walked over, wrapped an arm around his shoulder, and smiled. "There were definitely times when you annoyed me. There were times I couldn't stand you. But at the end of the day, I still love you. Happy now?" Living together in the same boarding house meant arguments and misunderstandings were inevitable. But despite everything, they cared about one another. They looked after one another like a real family. "All right, next," someone shouted. The game continued. This time it was Lana's turn to spin the bottle. Everyone stared nervously at it as it slowed down. Finally it stopped. "Mason!" Lana shouted. "Perfect. Let me think." She smiled knowingly. "I've got it. Mason, do you like Zarya?" The moment the question left her mouth, the atmosphere changed completely. Everyone immediately turned to look at Mason, waiting for his answer. Zarya lowered her head and avoided looking at him. She forced an awkward smile and stared at the ground. "Answer the question. You're a grown man. Speak up," Lana urged. After several seconds of silence, Mason finally nodded. "Yes, I do." The courtyard instantly erupted with cheers and laughter. Everyone turned toward Zarya and began teasing her. At long last, Mason had finally admitted the feelings he had kept hidden for so long. He had liked Zarya from the very beginning, but he never dared confess because he didn't know whether she felt the same way. He was afraid that if she rejected him, he might lose even the chance to remain her friend. So instead, he had chosen to stay silent, caring for her and loving her quietly from a distance. "Hurry up and say yes already. I think you two look great together," Lana called out as everyone continued teasing them. Faced with all the attention, Zarya said nothing. Instead, she quietly stood up and walked back to her room. Without realizing it, her reaction wounded Mason deeply. The smile faded from his face. His eyes followed her as she disappeared inside. A moment later, he stood up and returned to his own room. Nobody understood what they had done wrong. The atmosphere instantly became awkward and heavy. Eventually, the party came to an end. The next morning, everyone was busy getting ready for work. As Zarya stepped out of the alley, she unexpectedly ran into Mason. Feeling uncomfortable, she lowered her head, gave him a brief greeting, and quickly tried to walk away. "Zarya," Mason called out to her. He stepped forward and gently grabbed her hand. Looking directly into her eyes, he said, "Please stop avoiding me. I want us to talk honestly, just once. I care about you. Please give me a chance. Let me be part of your life. Let me take care of you and protect you. Will you?" His sudden confession left Zarya stunned. She had never expected him to do something like this. She always thought his feelings were temporary and that what he said the night before had simply been the result of drinking. "What are you talking about?" Zarya said nervously. "I'm not in the mood for jokes." Then she pulled her hand away. She wanted to avoid his eyes. She wanted to avoid his question. Because she didn't know how to answer. She wasn't ready to open her heart to anyone. The pain of the past had hardened her emotions and turned her into the distant, guarded woman she had become. Seeing that she was trying to escape, Mason stepped closer and continued, "I'm serious. I don't know what happened to you in the past. I don't know what you've been through, but right now, I want to stand beside you. I want to help heal those wounds. Please give me a chance. I promise I'll love you. I promise I'll help carry the burdens life puts on your shoulders." His sincere words slowly reached her heart. For years, nobody had treated her the way he did. Nobody had spoken to her with such kindness. Maybe she had been too harsh on herself. Suddenly, she remembered something Lana had once told her. Life is short. Nobody knows what tomorrow will bring. So love while you can. Open your heart while you still have time. Maybe Mason was the person she had been searching for. Maybe he was the one she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. But, "I'm afraid I don't deserve someone like you," Zarya finally whispered. The moment she said those words, hope lit up Mason's face. He immediately pulled her into his arms. Gently stroking her hair, he said, "Don't ever say that. There is no such thing as deserving or not deserving. In my eyes, you're the most wonderful woman in the world. You're beautiful. You're kind. You're compassionate. You're strong. And you deserve to be loved." Finally, comforted by his words, Zarya nodded. She accepted him. They came together with nothing in their hands except sincere hearts and a deep longing to love and be loved. 3 years later, "Careful, sweetheart. Slow down. You're going to fall," Zarya called out as she hurried after a little girl running across the courtyard. At last, after several years together, Zarya and Mason had welcomed a precious child into the world. Her name was Ava. She was an adorable little girl with chubby cheeks and bright eyes. Ever since Ava arrived, the boarding house had become much livelier. Zarya often joked that Ava was the happiest child in the world because she was surrounded by people who loved and protected her every day. Suddenly, a phone rang. Zarya quickly picked it up. "Hello? Zarya?" A familiar voice came from the other end. "Mom, how have you been, sweetheart? It's been months since you've come home. Are you doing all right?" Bernice asked gently. "I'm doing fine, Mom. Work has been busy lately, so I haven't been able to arrange a trip home. I'll come visit this weekend." After exchanging a few more words, the call ended. "Was that Mom?" Mason asked as he stepped out of the bathroom. Seeing the thoughtful expression on his wife's face, he immediately became concerned. "Yeah. Mom said it's been a while since we've come home. Then let's take Ava to see them this weekend. It's been a long time since we visited your parents." After hearing her husband's suggestion, Zarya let out a quiet sigh. But Dad, 2 years earlier, when she and Mason decided to be together, Zarya had returned home to ask for her parents' blessing. Clyde had reacted furiously. He refused to accept their relationship. Every time Mason came home with her, Clyde cursed at him and chased him away. Although the years had softened some of that anger, he still had not truly accepted them. Whenever Zarya returned home, Clyde always wore an unhappy expression. Even little Ava received little attention from him. In all the years since Ava had been born, Clyde had never once picked up his granddaughter or held her in his arms. Because of that, Zarya usually stayed only a day or two before leaving again. "Don't worry too much," Mason said softly. "Your father may act tough on the outside, but I know he loves you. I believe that if we keep proving our love and our commitment, one day he'll finally accept us. Family is sacred. No matter what happens, those bonds can never truly be broken. For years, you and your father have been trapped behind a wall neither of you wanted to tear down. Maybe it's time for you to be the one who takes the first step." Zarya smiled. She truly was fortunate to have married such a thoughtful and understanding man. Mason was right. For years, she and Clyde had barely spoken to each other. Pride had created a barrier between them, and neither side had been willing to cross it. 2 days later, the bus finally stopped on the familiar road leading into Willow Creek. As Zarya stepped down from the bus, she looked around at the surroundings and couldn't help smiling softly. This place had once been somewhere she loved deeply. It held countless beautiful memories, but it was also home to some of the most painful memories of her life. Holding Mason's hand tightly, Zarya gathered her courage and walked forward. Together, they headed toward the wooden house at the end of the village road. "Zarya, you're back!" Jalen came running out of the house. He threw his arms around her and shouted excitedly. He had grown so much since the last time she saw him. Now he stood a full head taller than she did. "You're home?" Clyde's voice came from behind them. Yes, Dad, we just arrived. Zarya replied. It had only been a few months since she last visited, but Clyde seemed noticeably older. More gray hairs had appeared in his hair. Fine wrinkles had begun to line his face. Looking at him now, she felt an unexpected tightness in her chest. Something seemed different about him today. For the first time in years, he had spoken first. His expression had changed as well. His eyes seemed warmer and gentler than before. In the past, even if she greeted him, he often acted as though he hadn't heard her. He would simply stare at her with silence and disapproval. What had happened to make a man like Clyde change so much? My granddaughter is here, Bernice exclaimed happily as she came out of the house. She immediately hurried over and picked up little Ava in her arms. Come on inside, both of you. Wash up and get some rest. You must be tired after such a long trip, Clyde said. Yes, sir, Mason replied politely. Then he followed Zarya inside the house. That night, Zarya slept in her mother's room. It had been months since they had seen each other, and they had countless things to talk about. Lying in her mother's embrace, Zarya felt like a child again. She wanted nothing more than to be comforted and loved. My child, are you happy? Bernice asked softly as she stroked her daughter's hair. Lying in her mother's embrace, Zarya felt safe and at peace. I'm very happy, Mom. Everything is good. You don't have to worry about me. Bernice smiled gently. For the past few months, a lot of things have happened here. Then she paused for a moment before speaking again. Do you remember the man who cheated on you all those years ago? The question immediately caught Zarya off guard. She didn't understand why her mother wanted to bring up a chapter of her life she had worked so hard to leave behind. What happened, Mom? That man finally confessed everything to the village. He admitted that Loretta paid him to sleep with you. The whole thing was a setup from the beginning. She wanted an excuse to throw you out of the family. Zarya fell silent. The truth was that she had already suspected something like that years ago. She remembered seeing the man come out of Loretta's room once before everything happened, but she had never had any proof. Without evidence, nobody would have believed her anyway. Why would he suddenly confess after all this time, she asked. Because Loretta stole his son, Bernice replied. What? Zarya stared at her mother in confusion. What do you mean she stole his son? Bernice let out a long sigh. You've been gone for so long that you don't know everything that's happened here. After your divorce, Darius married another woman. A few months later, she gave birth to a baby boy. Loretta was overjoyed. She threw a huge celebration and invited the entire village. Everyone thought the family had finally gotten the grandson they always wanted. But after some time, Darius discovered that his wife had been having an affair. And the man she was seeing turned out to be the same man Loretta had paid to ruin your life years ago. Zarya listened in stunned silence. The little boy wasn't Darius's son at all. He was the other man's child, Bernice continued. The truth eventually came out. Darius was actually infertile. That's why you were never able to have children while you lived in that house. When Loretta learned the truth, she completely lost her mind. She kidnapped the little boy and tried to keep him for herself. The police arrested her shortly afterward. She's serving time in prison now. Zarya could barely believe what she was hearing. And Darius? Nobody knows where he went. He disappeared after everything happened. Reginald is living alone now. The whole family fell apart. Bernice shook her head sadly. The entire village talks about them now. The same people who once insulted you are cursing that family every day. I suppose this is what people mean when they say that evil eventually pays for itself. Hearing the entire story, Zarya didn't know what to say. She had her own life now, a husband who loved her, a beautiful daughter, a family that brought her peace. As for the past, she no longer wanted to carry it with her. No amount of anger or hatred could undo what had happened. Nothing could erase those wounds. In the end, letting go and forgiving the past was the only way she could truly find peace. A few days later, it was time for Zarya and Mason to return to Charlotte and continue their work. This time, she didn't know how long it would be before she could come home again. Looking at her parents growing older with each passing year, Zarya silently promised herself that she would become successful. She wanted the rest of their lives to be comfortable and happy. She wanted them to see her thriving. She wanted them to see that she had finally found peace. We're heading out now, Mom and Dad. Please take care of yourselves. All right, travel safely, sweetheart, Bernice replied. After saying their goodbyes, Zarya and Mason started walking away from the house. Behind them, however, there was still a pair of eyes quietly watching her every step. Do you still have something you want to say? Bernice asked as she stood beside Clyde. Why didn't you say it earlier? She's already leaving now. The truth was that ever since Clyde learned that Zarya had been innocent all those years ago, he had been carrying an enormous burden of guilt. If he had never forced her to marry Darius, perhaps none of those tragedies would have happened. Part of the blame belonged to him. He knew that. Deep down, he had wanted to apologize to his daughter for a very long time. But every time he tried, the words refused to come out. In the end, every parent wants the best for their children. Clyde had honestly believed that marrying into a wealthy family would give Zarya a comfortable life free from hardship and struggle. He never imagined that his decision would become the very thing that pushed his daughter into hell. Suddenly, Clyde made up his mind. He began running after her. As the vehicle slowly started moving away, a thin, middle-aged man came running down the road behind it. "Zarya, wait! Wait for Dad!" Clyde shouted at the top of his lungs. Hearing the voice, Zarya immediately turned around. Seeing her father running after them, she quickly asked Mason to stop the vehicle. Confused, she opened the door and hurried toward him. "Dad, what's wrong?" she asked breathlessly. Before Zarya could say another word, Clyde rushed forward and pulled her into a tight embrace. Tears streamed down his face. This was only the second time in her life that she had ever seen her father cry. And both times he was crying because of her. For a moment, Zarya stood frozen. She didn't understand what was happening. Then she heard his trembling voice beside her ear. "I'm sorry." Clyde's entire body shook as he spoke. "Dad is sorry." At last, after all these years, the apology he had carried in his heart was finally spoken aloud. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of countless regrets, countless sleepless nights, and countless moments of guilt. Clyde knew that no apology could erase what had happened. It could not take away the years of suffering. It could not heal every wound he had helped create. But he still needed his daughter to know the truth. "I'm sorry for everything." Tears rolled down his weathered face. "I'm sorry for forcing you into that marriage. I'm sorry for not believing you. I'm sorry for hurting you when you needed me most. Dad failed you." Hearing it, Zarya could no longer hold back her own tears. She wrapped her arms around him and cried. For years there had been a wall standing between them. A wall built from pain, regret, pride, and misunderstanding. Now, at long last, that wall had finally come down. Father and daughter stood there holding each other as tears flowed freely. Years of sorrow seemed to wash away in that single embrace. Neither of them needed to say anything else. They both understood. They both knew how much they loved each other. After everything that had happened, everyone finally understood one another a little more. They learned how to love more deeply. They learned how to appreciate one another more than before. Sometimes parents make mistakes, not because they don't love their children, but because they love them in the wrong way. Sometimes their pride is too great. Sometimes they become so convinced they are right that they end up saying words that wound the hearts of the very children they are trying to protect. But in the end, family always finds a way. The bond between parent and child is stronger than pride, stronger than misunderstanding, stronger than anger. Time may create distance, pain may build walls. Mistakes may leave scars that last for years. Yet true family remains. It survives hardship. It survives suffering. It survives even the deepest wounds. Looking at her father standing before her, Zarya finally understood that people are imperfect. Parents are imperfect too. They make mistakes, they fail, they regret, they learn, and sometimes, when given the chance, they spend the rest of their lives trying to make things right. At that moment, surrounded by the people she loved most, Zarya felt something she had not felt in a very long time: peace. The kind of peace that comes only after forgiveness. The kind of peace that comes when a wounded heart finally lets go of the past. As the vehicle slowly disappeared down the road, Clyde and Bernice stood together watching their daughter leave. Their eyes were filled not with sadness, but with hope. Because this time they knew she was leaving with happiness. And after everything she had endured, that was all they had ever wanted for her. In the end, family triumphed over everything. It overcame every hardship. It overcame every obstacle. And nothing in this world was strong enough to defeat it. After finally letting go of the burden she had carried in her heart for so many years, Zarya felt lighter than she had in a very long time. As the years passed in Charlotte, she and Mason continued working hard and building a life together from absolutely nothing. Starting with only determination and two empty hands, they slowly created a future for themselves. Mason was always by her side, encouraging her, supporting her, and growing together with her through every challenge. Eventually, after years of hard work and sacrifice, they were finally able to buy a small house of their own. Not long afterward, they opened a restaurant and began running it together. Life gradually became more comfortable. The financial struggles that had once followed them everywhere slowly faded away. Yet as their lives improved, Mason also began to change. The thoughtful, warm, and attentive man who used to notice every little detail about her was no longer the same. Back when they had very little, life was difficult, but their family was filled with laughter and happiness. Even during the hardest days, they always felt close to one another. Now, however, as their circumstances improved, Mason began showing sides of himself that Zarya had never seen before. He became more careless, more impatient, more easily angered. At times, he could be controlling and stubborn. Lately, she didn't understand what had happened between them. The two of them argued more and more often. They disagreed on almost everything. It felt as though they could no longer find common ground. Mason left early every morning and came home late every night. He paid little attention to the house. He barely helped with Ava. More and more responsibilities fell onto Zarya's shoulders until she felt exhausted almost every day. The man she once believed she knew better than anyone seemed to be slowly becoming a stranger. It was already 1 o'clock in the morning, yet Zarya was still sitting alone waiting for Mason to come home. She glanced repeatedly at the clock hanging on the wall, but there was still no sign of him. Finally, she picked up her phone and called him. The phone rang several times on the other end, but no one answered. 15 minutes later, the sound of knocking came from the front door. Slowly, Zarya walked over and opened it. Standing there was Mason. He had returned home completely drunk. His steps were unsteady as he stumbled forward. The strong smell of alcohol hit her immediately. It took all of her strength to support him and help him into the bedroom. Looking at the man in front of her, Zarya let out a long, exhausted sigh. She couldn't understand why he had changed so much. The person standing before her now was nothing like the man she had fallen in love with. The way he looked and behaved reminded her of the kind of useless men she had always despised. The sight of him drove her crazy. Frustrated and overwhelmed, she grabbed his shoulders and forced him to sit upright. Then she began shouting, "Do you even know what day it is? You're drunk again." "I'm not drunk," Mason mumbled. "I don't understand anymore. Do you even see me as your wife? I call you and you don't answer. You've been gone since morning and now you're stumbling home in the middle of the night. What exactly do you want from me, Mason? What am I supposed to do to make you happy?" As she spoke, tears began running down her face. The helplessness was crushing. She felt trapped because she no longer knew what she was supposed to do. Sometimes, she wished they had stayed poor forever. Life had been harder back then, but it had also been peaceful. They had been happy. And now, every day felt exhausting. Their lives seemed to revolve around arguments and disappointment. A painful thought entered her mind. Maybe Mason didn't love her anymore. Maybe that was why he had changed. Hearing his wife's complaints, Mason slowly sat up and pointed directly at her. "That's enough. You're always judging people. I'm sick of it. You know what it's like to be exhausted, but what about me?" Zarya shot back immediately. "During the day, I work nonstop at the restaurant. At night, I come home, clean the house, cook meals, and take care of our daughter. You don't help with anything. All you do is go out drinking and wasting time. I'm a human being too. I get hurt. I get tired too." "Are you seriously complaining to me right now?" Mason shouted. "You can't even handle those little things? You're only saying all this because you're looking for a fight." Every word that came from his mouth cut deeply into her heart. "A fight?" Zarya stared at him in disbelief. "Anyone. You think that's what this is? I'm trying to talk to you because our family is falling apart. I'm trying to tell you that I can't carry everything by myself anymore." "Then stop," Mason snapped back. "I never forced you to do any of it. If you're so tired, then quit." The moment those words left his mouth, Zarya felt as though something inside her shattered. She stared at the man standing in front of her. This was the same man who once promised to share every burden she carried. The same man who promised to spend his life protecting her. Yet now, when she desperately needed understanding, all he offered was blame and indifference. His words pierced straight through her heart like arrows. "Mommy, I'm scared." Little Ava burst into tears as she sat nearby watching her parents argue. The sound of her daughter's crying instantly cut through the tension in the room. Hearing her child sobbing, Zarya immediately forced herself to swallow the pain and anger she was feeling. No matter how hurt she was, she didn't want Ava to witness her parents fighting. She didn't want her daughter growing up surrounded by shouting, resentment, and fear. Taking a deep breath, Zarya turned away from Mason and walked toward Ava. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here." She gently lifted her daughter into her arms and held her tightly against her chest. Ava wrapped her small arms around her mother's neck and continued crying. "Don't be scared. Mommy's here. Everything's okay," Zarya whispered softly as she stroked the little girl's hair. Then she carried Ava out into the living room. Sitting down on the couch, She cradled her daughter against her body and gently rocked her back and forth. Although tears still lingered in her own eyes, she forced herself to smile. She hummed a quiet lullaby and continued comforting her frightened child until Ava slowly began calming down. Then Zarya pulled a blanket around her daughter, held her close, and lovingly soothed her little girl to sleep. The next morning, Mason finally woke up. He slowly walked out of the bedroom and immediately came face to face with Zarya. For a brief moment, neither of them said a single word. They simply stood there in silence, waiting for the other person to speak first. Yet both of them were too stubborn. Neither was willing to be the first to back down. Neither was willing to take the first step toward reconciliation. The argument from the night before still lingered heavily between them. Without saying anything, Zarya busied herself preparing breakfast for Ava. Once everything was ready, she quietly helped her daughter get dressed and took her to school. On the other side, Mason remained silent as well. He grabbed his things and left the house without a word. The atmosphere inside the home grew colder and more uncomfortable with every passing hour. It felt as though an invisible wall had been built between them. Every glance carried tension. Every silence felt heavy. Their marriage now resembled a bomb waiting to explode. All it would take was one small trigger, one careless word, one more misunderstanding, and everything between them could fall apart at any moment. "You look exhausted today. Is something wrong?" One of the young employees at the restaurant suddenly asked. "I couldn't sleep last night, so I'm a little tired today," Zarya replied. "Did you and Mason argue again?" the girl asked. "Why would you ask that?" "Because last night I saw him with another woman. I think she might be someone you know." The two of them looked really close. "Honestly, I think you should pay more attention to Mason. I have a feeling he's cheating on you. Don't be ridiculous. Stop talking nonsense and get back to work." Zarya immediately dismissed her and sent her back inside. But despite her words, what the girl had said planted a seed of doubt in her heart. Never once had she considered the possibility that Mason might have another woman behind her back. And if what the girl said was true, then the woman who had been with him was supposedly someone Zarya knew. That only made her more confused. She didn't have many friends in Charlotte. Other than a few people she had stayed close to from the old boarding house, there was hardly anyone she regularly spent time with. So who exactly was the woman Mason had been seen with the night before? Carrying her curiosity and growing suspicion with her, that evening Zarya carefully chose her words before asking Mason, "I heard that last night you were seen with a woman. Someone said she was a friend of mine. Is that true?" The sudden question visibly startled him. For a brief moment, his expression changed, but almost immediately he forced himself to remain calm. "Where are you hearing all this nonsense?" Mason replied. "You're listening to gossip again and coming home imagining things. Last night I was out drinking with some friends and had a few too many drinks. Who exactly do you think I was with?" Then his tone became irritated. "From now on, stop listening to random rumors and coming home to interrogate your husband. I don't like it." After saying that, Mason stood up abruptly and walked into the bedroom. Watching him leave, Zarya suddenly felt guilty. Maybe she had gone too far. Maybe asking him that question had hurt his pride. After all, marriage was supposed to be built on trust. If she kept doubting him over every rumor she heard, then how could either of them ever be happy? The following day was the weekend, and Zarya's restaurant was packed with customers. She had been busy nonstop since dawn and hadn't had a moment to rest. The entire day passed without her even finding time to eat. By now, it was already 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and she still hadn't been able to pick Ava up from school. Quickly grabbing her phone, she called Mason. "Where are you?" she asked. "I've been busy at the restaurant since this morning and haven't seen you all day." "It's time to pick up Ava. Please go get her. We're really busy today, so I'll be home late." "All right. I know," Mason replied before hanging up almost immediately. A couple of hours later, around 7 o'clock that evening, Zarya received a call from an unfamiliar number. A man's voice spoke on the other end. "Hello. Are you Ava's mother?" The moment she heard those words, a terrible feeling settled in her chest. "Yes, I am." "Who is this?" she asked nervously. "I'm the security guard at Songbird Preschool. Your daughter is sitting here crying because nobody came to pick her up. Everyone else has already gone home. No matter how busy you are, if you can't pick up your child, then at least ask someone else to do it. You're a mother. This is irresponsible. Come get your daughter immediately." Before Zarya could respond, the man hung up. Panic flooded through her. She immediately dropped everything and raced toward the school on her bicycle. While rushing there, she repeatedly called Mason, but she couldn't reach him. When she finally arrived, she saw Ava sitting alone and crying. Zarya ran toward her and wrapped her arms around her daughter. "I'm sorry. Mommy's so sorry. The moment Ava saw her mother, she cried even harder. A few seconds later, the security guard walked over. "I don't understand what kind of parents leave a child alone like this," he said sternly. "No matter how busy you are, you don't leave your child waiting by herself. If I hadn't been here today and someone else had found her instead, do you realize what could have happened? You're lucky you're standing here apologizing right now. Thank you. Thank you so much," Zarya said repeatedly while bowing her head. Carrying Ava in her arms, she couldn't stop imagining what might have happened if her daughter had been taken by the wrong person. The thought terrified her. If anything had happened to Ava that day, she would never have been able to forgive Mason, and she would never have forgiven herself. After bringing Ava home, feeding her dinner, and putting her to bed, Zarya picked up her phone once again and continued calling Mason. By now, it was already midnight, yet he still hadn't come home. She couldn't reach him no matter how many times she called. The worry was driving her insane. She paced back and forth through the house, unable to sit still and unable to sleep. Finally, around 1 o'clock in the morning, Mason returned home completely drunk. "Where have you been?" Zarya demanded the moment he stepped through the door. "Why didn't you pick up Ava? If you couldn't do it, then you should have told me. You could have sent a message. You didn't even bother doing that. You're her father. How could you do something like this?" Instead of acknowledging his mistake, Mason immediately became angry. "I have my own work to do. Where I go is none of your business. You're sticking your nose into everything. Ava is your daughter," Zarya shouted. "Whose daughter?" Mason snapped back. "How do I know she's really mine? Maybe I've been raising another man's child this whole time. Didn't you already have one husband before me? And all those scandals that came with it?" Slap! Zarya struck him across the face without hesitation. What he had just said was one of the greatest insults he could possibly have thrown at her. The man standing before her was no longer the Mason she once knew. She remembered the days when he promised that all she had to do was be happy, and he would carry every burden the world placed on her shoulders. Yet now he was willing to invent lies and throw them in her face just to hurt her dignity and wound her heart. "How can you even say something like that?" she cried. The moment Mason felt the sting of the slap, his face darkened. His eyes turned cold. Slowly, he raised his hand and struck her across the face. Then he lunged forward and wrapped both hands around her throat. His grip tightened until she could barely breathe. "How dare you hit me?" he roared. Never before had Mason spoken to her this way. Never before had he raised a hand against her. Yet now he was standing over her, filled with rage. Time had changed him completely. The gentle, kind-hearted man she once loved had become a drunken and violent stranger. Zarya could only hold her face and cry in pain. She had truly believed she married the right man. She thought her future would be filled with happiness. Yet somehow, when life was difficult, they had survived every hardship together. And now that life had become easier, his true nature seemed to be changing before her eyes. After the incident that night, Zarya and Mason barely spoke to each other. The atmosphere inside the house became suffocating. Every room felt heavy with tension. Silence had replaced conversation, and resentment lingered in every corner of their home. Today, while Zarya was at home, her phone vibrated. A text message had arrived. "Zarya, come here right now." The message was from Talia, the same employee who had previously told her about seeing Mason with another woman. The moment she read it, a terrible feeling settled in her chest. Sensing that something was wrong, she immediately called Talia. "What's going on?" Zarya asked anxiously. "I already told you before, but you didn't believe me. This time I need you to see it with your own eyes." Talia's voice sounded serious. Whatever she had seen, she clearly believed it was important enough to make Zarya come immediately. Zarya's heart began pounding uncontrollably. She didn't know what she was about to discover, but deep down she already feared the answer. Feeling that something was terribly wrong, Zarya asked a neighbor to watch Ava for a while and immediately rushed to the address Talia had sent her. The entire way there, her mind was filled with anxiety and confusion. She kept telling herself that everything must be a misunderstanding. Mason couldn't possibly be having an affair. When she arrived, Talia was already waiting outside. "What's going on?" Zarya asked breathlessly. "I told you before, but you didn't believe me. That's why I had to call you here today." Talia replied, "Come with me." As she spoke, she grabbed Zarya's hand and hurried toward the entrance of an upscale restaurant. According to Talia, she had just seen Mason walk inside, holding hands with another woman. She wanted Zarya to see everything for herself. She wanted her to finally see the truth and catch him in the act. Listening to her, Zarya followed her inside. Her heart pounded harder with every step. Part of her wanted to discover the truth. Another part desperately hoped there was nothing to discover at all. Today she wanted to know once and for all whether her husband truly had another woman in his life. There, look, Talia suddenly whispered as she pointed toward a table inside the restaurant. Following the direction of her finger, Zarya slowly turned her head. The moment she saw the people sitting there, her entire body froze. The man was Mason, her husband, but the woman sitting beside him made even less sense. Lana? Zarya whispered in disbelief. No, that couldn't be right. There had to be some kind of mistake. But Lana had once been one of her closest friends. She was someone Zarya trusted completely. There was no way Lana would be involved with Mason. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. What are you two doing here? Zarya suddenly demanded as she marched toward their table. Why are you with Lana? Will someone please tell me what's going on? Her voice shook with confusion and anger. She refused to believe what her eyes were seeing. She wanted answers directly from them. She wanted them to explain everything. The moment Mason and Lana saw her standing there, both of them visibly panicked. They looked at each other before turning back toward Zarya. Why are you here? Mason asked nervously. Don't ask me why I'm here, Zarya shot back. What you need to do right now is explain why the two of you are together. What exactly has been happening behind my back? Tell me the truth. Calm down, Zarya. Lana quickly interrupted. You're misunderstanding everything. Mason and I aren't. Stop, Zarya snapped. I want the truth. Right now. The fear on both of their faces only made her heart sink deeper. Something was terribly wrong. She could feel it. Tell me. Her voice cracked as tears began forming in her eyes. What kind of relationship do you two have? Calm down, Zarya. Everything is just a misunderstanding, Lana tried to explain. Stop lying, Mason suddenly interrupted. I'm tired of this. The moment those words left his mouth, Lana's face immediately changed. Mason, have you lost your mind? She snapped. But Mason ignored her. He turned and looked directly at Zarya. What's going on? Zarya asked. What truth are you talking about? Her voice trembled. Deep down, she already feared what she was about to hear. Tell me. Mason took a deep breath before speaking. The truth is, Lana and I are together. For a moment, Zarya couldn't even process the words. It felt as if her entire world had stopped moving. What? She whispered. Lana is pregnant, Mason continued. The baby she's carrying is mine. Every word struck Zarya like a knife. She stood there staring at him, unable to believe what she had just heard. Zarya, I'm sorry. Mason lowered his head. But can we stop this? Lana needs me. The baby needs a father. Suddenly everything finally made sense. The late nights, the lies, the distance, the drinking, the coldness, the arguments. All of it came together. All this time, she had been living with a man who no longer loved her. While she fought to save their marriage, he had already given his heart to someone else. While she worried about their family, he had been building another one behind her back. So all this time, she had been nothing more than a fool. The moment the truth came out, Zarya completely lost control. Rage, betrayal, heartbreak, and despair exploded inside her all at once. She lunged toward Mason and began hitting him with all the strength she had. Plates and bowls crashed to the floor as she swept everything off the table. The sound of breaking dishes echoed throughout the restaurant. You're a terrible man, she screamed through her tears. How could you do this to me? Her entire body shook violently. You said Lana needs you. You said the baby in her stomach needs a father. Then what about me? What about Ava? Zarya cried hysterically. Doesn't your daughter need a father too? Are you really willing to let people say she's a child without a father? Are you really that cruel? Her voice cracked as she fell to her knees. How could you do this? Why? Why? She collapsed onto the floor in complete despair. Never in her life had she imagined something like this would happen. She never imagined the man she loved would betray her, and she never imagined that the woman stealing her husband would be Lana. The betrayal was so shocking that she could barely breathe. The truth was that Mason and Lana had been involved with each other for nearly 6 months. All that time, only Zarya remained blind to what was happening. While she fought to protect her family, the two people she trusted most had been building a relationship behind her back. Zarya, I'm sorry. Lana spoke through tears. I never meant for this to happen. I truly didn't. But I love Mason so much. Hearing those words, Zarya almost laughed from the absurdity of it all. Once upon a time, Lana had encouraged Mason to pursue her. She had supported their relationship and celebrated their happiness. Now the same woman stood before her after stealing her husband and called it love. Love? Zarya repeated bitterly. Before Lana could continue, Zarya stepped forward and slapped her hard across the face. Shut up. Zarya's voice trembled with rage. Don't stand there acting righteous in front of me." Then she turned around and walked away. She couldn't stay there another second. Looking at Lana's innocent expression made her sick. She hated both of them. She hated the lies. She hated the betrayal. Most of all, she hated the fact that she had been the only fool wearing the crown of betrayal without ever realizing it. That night, Zarya dragged her exhausted body through the streets alone. The city lights blurred before her eyes as tears continued running down her face. Everything had happened so suddenly that she still couldn't fully accept it. Even now, she couldn't believe what she had just witnessed inside that restaurant was real. She had always believed she had finally found the right man. After all the pain and suffering she endured in the past, she thought fate had finally rewarded her with happiness. She thought the worst years of her life were behind her. She thought the family she had built with Mason would last forever. But now she realized that everything had only been an illusion she created for herself. Mason had left her. The man who once promised to stand beside her no matter what happened had abandoned her. The man who once held her while she cried and swore he would never let anyone hurt her had become the very person who caused her the deepest pain. Every memory they shared now felt like a cruel joke. The promises, the sacrifices, the dreams they built together. All of it seemed meaningless. Zarya continued walking without knowing where she was going. She felt completely empty inside. The world around her moved as usual, yet her own world had collapsed. She didn't know what tomorrow would look like. She didn't know how she would explain any of this to Ava. She didn't know how she would survive another heartbreak after everything she had already endured. The only thing she knew for certain was that the man who once swore he would protect her forever was gone. The man she loved had become someone else entirely. 1 week later, it was finally the day Zarya and Mason appeared in court to finalize their divorce. All of their assets were divided equally, and custody of Ava was awarded to Zarya. "I'm sorry," Mason spoke. They were standing outside the courthouse after all the paperwork had been completed. These would likely be the final words they ever exchanged as husband and wife. Hearing his apology now, Zarya felt nothing. The words came far too late. They sounded less like remorse and more like pity. Perhaps it was the last thing Mason could offer her before walking out of her life forever. "You don't need to apologize," Zarya replied calmly. "Let's just accept that our paths were only meant to cross for a while. I only hope that one day you won't repeat the same mistakes again. In this world, everything has consequences. I believe that." After saying those words, she turned around and walked away without looking back. Once again, happiness had slipped through her fingers. But perhaps every person who entered her life had done so for a reason. None of them arrived by accident. Maybe fate had sent them to teach her lessons she needed to learn. Some came to love her, some came to hurt her. And all of them left behind experiences that slowly transformed her into a stronger and wiser woman. Every person who passed through her life had helped shape the person she was becoming. 2 years later, after a long period of hard work and dedication, Zarya had finally achieved remarkable success. She raised Ava on her own and became the owner of one of the largest restaurant chains in Charlotte. At only 30 years old, she had built the life she once dreamed about. Her days passed peacefully. Every morning she focused on work, and every evening she returned home to spend time with her daughter. At last, she had turned her dreams into reality. She had become a modern, independent woman who was financially secure and fully capable of providing a comfortable life for both her daughter and her parents. Perhaps because of all the pain she had endured in the past, Zarya had never opened her heart to anyone again. Over the years, her emotions had slowly hardened. The wounds left behind by love had never fully disappeared. Now there was only one thing in the world that truly mattered to her: Ava. Her daughter had become the center of her universe. Everything else seemed insignificant in comparison. Love no longer interested her. Relationships no longer mattered. Her only concern now was giving Ava the happiest life possible. "Oh, Zarya, it's been so long. How have you been?" A familiar voice suddenly called out. "I've been doing well," Zarya smiled. It was Dylan. Today, while taking Ava to the supermarket, she had unexpectedly run into him. Seeing a familiar face from the old boarding house brought back memories she hadn't thought about in years. Dylan looked older now, more mature than before, but he still carried the same warmth and friendliness she remembered. He glanced at Ava and smiled. "She's gotten so big." Then his expression softened. "I still feel sorry about what happened between you and Mason. If only back then." Dylan stopped himself midway through the sentence. He seemed unsure whether he should continue. Looking at him, Zarya already had a feeling she knew where the conversation was heading. Listening to Dylan, Zarya remained silent. Then he continued speaking. "Ever since Mason left her and chose Lana, Their lives had been filled with constant conflict and turmoil. Because Lana had already been through 2 marriages and had children of her own, the subject became a never-ending source of arguments between them. Life was difficult. Work was stressful. And unlike Zarya, Lana was not someone who knew how to support or understand her partner. She thought only about herself. During the day, she stayed home. At night, she often went out. The children in the household were left entirely on Mason's shoulders. Over time, all of the pressure and frustration built up until their relationship became filled with resentment and conflict. "Mason's having a really hard time now," Dylan said with a sigh. "He's working several jobs at once. Lana doesn't help with anything. There are so many mouths to feed, and all the responsibility falls on him. If only he hadn't made that mistake years ago, things never would have turned out like this." As Dylan spoke, he couldn't hide the sadness in his voice. He felt sorry for Mason. He felt sorry for Zarya. When people first heard about their divorce, everyone had been shocked. They mourned the loss of what once seemed like a beautiful love story. They mourned the years of youth Zarya had devoted to Mason. But in the end, perhaps everything came down to fate. Meeting someone may be destiny, yet whether 2 people can remain together is ultimately a choice. Hearing Dylan's words, Zarya simply smiled. There was no anger in her heart anymore, no resentment, no bitterness. The truth was that she no longer hated Mason, and she no longer blamed Lana. Time had healed wounds that once seemed impossible to overcome. She now viewed both of them as people who had simply passed through her life. They had brought her pain, but they had also taught her valuable lessons. Those experiences had helped her grow stronger, wiser, and more independent than she had ever imagined possible. Looking back now, she realized that holding on to hatred would change nothing. The past could never be rewritten. What had already happened. Some memories were meant to remain where they belonged, in the past. "It's all right," Zarya finally said. "Some things just aren't meant to last forever. I've already let it go." Dylan nodded quietly. He could see that she meant every word. The woman standing before him was no longer the heartbroken girl who once cried over a shattered marriage. She had found peace, and perhaps that was worth more than anything else. The past was the past, and it was time to let it rest. Being single was fine. Being in love was fine too. In the end, both were simply different stages of life. There was no need to envy the people around you, and there was no reason to feel dissatisfied with your current situation. Whether there was someone standing beside you or not, whether there was someone sharing your dreams and goals or not, every emotion and every experience in life had value. Each stage existed for a reason. Every joy, every heartbreak, every success, and every failure carried lessons that could only be understood by living through them personally. Looking at Ava walking beside her, Zarya smiled softly. She finally understood something that had taken years to learn. Growth was not about escaping loneliness. It was not about rushing to find someone to love. It was not about proving anything to the world. True maturity came from experiencing life in all its forms, and allowing those experiences to shape you into a better version of yourself. As long as a person continued learning, continued growing, and continued moving forward, every chapter of life could become meaningful. And perhaps that was the greatest reward of all.